Hello, beautiful soul. I want you to know that wherever you are in this moment, whatever you're feeling, you are so welcome here. There's something deeply sacred about the time we're sharing together, and I honor you for choosing to be present with yourself in this way. Throughout my years of working with people from all walks of life, I've noticed something profound. So many of us carry this invisible weight on our shoulders, the constant feeling that we need to explain ourselves, justify our choices, defend our decisions, and somehow prove that we're worthy of the space we occupy in this world. Perhaps you felt this too. That exhausting need to make everyone understand why you made a certain choice, why you feel a certain way, or why you can't do something someone expects of you. Maybe you find yourself over-explaining even the smallest decisions, why you chose that restaurant, why you're wearing that outfit, why you need to leave the gathering early. Or perhaps you've caught yourself complaining about the same situations over and over, hoping that somehow, if you just express your frustration enough times, something will magically change. If any of this feels familiar, I want you to breathe with me for a moment. Take a gentle breath in, and as you exhale, know that you're not alone in this pattern. This tendency to over-explain and complain isn't a character flaw. It's a learned behavior, and anything that's learned can be unlearned with patience and love. The truth is, you already possess everything you need to step into a more powerful, peaceful way of being. You already have within you the capacity to own your power in the quiet strength of your own knowing. Today, we're going to explore something that might feel revolutionary at first, but I promise you, it's as natural as breathing once you allow it to become part of who you are. We're going to talk about the incredible freedom that comes when you no longer feel compelled to explain every aspect of your life to others, and when you release the habit of complaining as your primary way of processing life's challenges. This isn't about becoming cold or disconnected from others. It's about discovering the profound strength that lives in your center, the part of you that knows your worth without needing external validation. You see, when we constantly explain and complain, we're essentially asking the outside world to validate our internal experience. We're saying, please tell me that my feelings are acceptable, that my choices make sense, that I'm a good person deserving of understanding. But what if I told you that the person whose approval matters most, yours, is already available to you? What if the understanding you're seeking from others is something you can give yourself right here, right now? The journey we're taking together isn't about cutting yourself off from meaningful communication or healthy expression of your needs. It's about learning to distinguish between communication that serves your highest good and habits that drain your precious life force energy. It's about discovering that your power doesn't come from convincing others of your worth. It comes from knowing your worth so deeply that you don't need others to confirm it for you. As we move through this time together, I encourage you to approach yourself with the same gentleness you would offer a dear friend who's learning something new. Change doesn't happen overnight, and that's perfectly okay. What matters is that you're here, you're open, and you're ready to explore a new way of being in the world. Your willingness to grow is already a beautiful act of self-love. Now let's explore what happens when we find ourselves caught in the cycle of constant explanation. When we feel compelled to justify every decision, every feeling, every choice we make, something profound occurs in our energy field. It's as if we're constantly leaking our life force through tiny holes, giving away our power bit by bit until we feel drained and depleted. This isn't something most of us are taught to recognize, but once you begin to see it, you'll wonder how you ever missed it. Think about how it feels in your body when you're in the middle of explaining yourself to someone who clearly doesn't understand or agree with your perspective. Notice how your chest might tighten, how your breathing might become shallow, how your heart rate might increase. Your body is giving you valuable information. It's telling you that this interaction is costing you something precious. Your nervous system is responding to the stress of trying to control someone else's perception of you, and this stress has real physical consequences. The truth is, when we over-explain, we're often operating from a place of fear rather than love. We're afraid that if people don't understand our motivations, they'll judge us, reject us, or think less of us. This fear drives us to share more and more details, to provide more and more context, hoping that the right explanation will finally bring the understanding we're craving. But here's what I've learned over the years. The people who are meant to understand you will understand you with very little explanation, and those who are determined to misunderstand you won't be swayed no matter how much you explain. When we constantly feel the need to explain ourselves, we're essentially training others to expect explanations from us. We're teaching them that our choices are open for debate, that our feelings need to be justified, that our boundaries are negotiable if they can just find the right argument. This creates a dynamic where others feel entitled to question every aspect of our lives, and we feel obligated to provide answers. It's an exhausting cycle that serves no one. Consider how differently you feel when you make a decision from a place of inner knowing and simply allow that decision to stand without justification. There's a quiet strength in this approach, a dignity that speaks volumes. When you know in your heart that you're making the right choice for yourself, you don't need others to agree or even understand. Your inner knowing becomes your compass, and you learn to trust it more than the opinions of others. The same principle applies to complaining. When we repeatedly voice our dissatisfaction about the same situations without taking action to change them, we're essentially rehearsing our problems rather than solving them. Each time we tell the story of what's wrong, we're energetically reinforcing the very circumstances we claim to want to change. We're keeping ourselves stuck in victim consciousness, focusing on what's being done to us rather than what we can do for ourselves. This doesn't mean you should never express concerns or seek support when you're facing challenges. There's a beautiful difference between sharing your experience for the purpose of healing, connection, or problem solving, and repeatedly complaining about the same issues as a way of avoiding responsibility for creating change. One feels expansive and leads to growth. The other feels contractive and keeps you spinning in circles. When you begin to notice how much energy you spend explaining and complaining, you might be surprised at just how much of your precious life force has been going toward these activities. All of that energy, all of that mental and emotional bandwidth becomes available for creating the life you actually want when you learn to redirect it toward more constructive purposes. To understand why we develop these patterns of over-explaining and complaining, we need to look gently at where these behaviors began. For most of us, the roots go back to our earliest experiences of trying to navigate relationships and get our needs met. As children, we learned that explaining ourselves was often necessary for survival. We needed adults to understand why we were crying, why we were afraid, why we needed help. This was healthy and appropriate behavior for a child who was genuinely dependent on others for care and safety. The challenge arises when we carry these childhood strategies into our adult lives without examining whether they still serve us. Many of us grew up in environments where our feelings, choices, and experiences were regularly questioned or dismissed. We learned that in order to be heard or respected, we needed to provide compelling evidence for why our inner experience was valid. We developed the belief that our worth was conditional on our ability to make a convincing case for ourselves. If you grew up in a household where emotions were seen as inconvenient or where your perspective was regularly invalidated, you might have learned to over-explain as a way of trying to earn the right to feel what you feel. Perhaps you noticed that when you provided enough context, enough reasons, enough justification, you were more likely to receive the understanding or compassion you needed. This created a neural pathway that says safety comes through explanation. Similarly, if complaining was modeled for you as a primary way of processing life's challenges, you might have unconsciously adopted this as your default response to difficulty. Perhaps you grew up hearing adults repeatedly voice their dissatisfaction about work, relationships, or circumstances without taking action to create change. This can teach us that complaining is a normal, even expected way of dealing with problems. These patterns are also deeply connected to our relationship with approval and validation. When we didn't receive unconditional love and acceptance as children, we often develop a hypervigilance around other people's opinions of us. We become approval-seeking machines, constantly scanning our environment for signs of acceptance or rejection. This drives us to explain our choices and defend our feelings because we're unconsciously trying to maintain a sense of safety through other people's approval. The beautiful thing about understanding these roots is that it allows us to approach our healing with compassion rather than judgment. These patterns developed for good reasons. They were your psyche's way of trying to keep you safe and loved in circumstances where your authentic self might not have been fully welcomed. The part of you that learned to over-explain and complain was doing the best it could with the tools available at the time. Your body holds the memory of all these early experiences, and it continues to respond as if those old threats to your safety and worth are still present. When someone questions your decision or seems disapproving of your choice, your nervous system might activate the same stress response it developed years ago when your survival felt dependent on gaining approval. Your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, and your mind races to find the right words to defend yourself, even though you're no longer a vulnerable child who needs protection. This is why the mind-body connection is so important in this healing work. Your thoughts about needing to explain and justify yourself create real physical sensations in your body, and these physical sensations reinforce the mental patterns. It becomes a cycle where your thoughts trigger stress in your body, and the stress in your body triggers more anxious thoughts about needing to explain yourself. Breaking this cycle requires working with both your mental patterns and your physical responses. When you begin to recognize these patterns with love rather than judgment, something beautiful happens. You start to see that the part of you that over-explains and complains isn't the enemy. It's a part of you that learned to cope with difficult circumstances. You can thank this part for trying to keep you safe while gently teaching it new ways of being in the world. You can reassure the frightened child within you that you're now the adult and you have the power to create safety through your own choices rather than through convincing others to approve of you. This understanding opens the door to true transformation because it allows you to heal the wound rather than just managing the symptom. When you address the core belief that your worth is conditional on other people's understanding and approval, the compulsive need to explain and complain naturally begins to dissolve. You start to operate from a place of inner security rather than external validation, and this changes everything about how you move through the world. Now let's look more closely at how complaining can become a trap that keeps us stuck in patterns that don't serve our highest good. When we find ourselves repeatedly voicing dissatisfaction about the same situations, we're essentially rehearsing the very experiences we claim we want to change. Each time we tell the story of how unfair life is, how difficult our circumstances are, or how other people are disappointing us, we're energetically reinforcing these realities and making them more solid in our experience. There's a profound difference between healthy expression of concerns and what I call chronic complaining. When you share a challenge with someone for the purpose of seeking genuine support, gaining perspective, or working toward a solution, that's a life-affirming use of communication. Your body feels different when you're sharing in this way. There's often a sense of relief, connection, and forward movement. You're not looking to stay stuck in the problem. You're looking to move through it. Chronic complaining, on the other hand, has a different energy entirely. It's repetitive. It focuses on what's wrong rather than what's possible, and it often leaves both you and the listener feeling drained rather than energized. When you're in complaint mode, you're essentially asking the universe to give you more of what you're focusing on. You're putting your attention on lack, limitation, and dissatisfaction, and the universe responds by bringing you more experiences that match that vibration. Your body knows the difference, even when your mind might not recognize it immediately. Notice how you feel physically after a conversation where you've been complaining compared to how you feel after a conversation where you've been solution-focused or appreciative. Complaining creates a heaviness in your energy field, a sense of being weighed down or stuck. It often leaves you feeling more frustrated than when you started, not less. This is your body's wisdom telling you that this approach isn't serving your well-being. The challenge with complaining is that it can become addictive. There's a temporary release that comes from voicing your frustrations, and this can feel like relief in the moment. But like any addiction, the relief is short-lived, and you find yourself needing to complain more and more to get the same sense of release. Meanwhile, the underlying issues remain unchanged, and you've trained your nervous system to see problems everywhere you look. When you're caught in complaint consciousness, you're operating from what we might call victim energy. This doesn't mean you're a victim or that you're choosing to suffer. It simply means you're approaching life from a position of powerlessness rather than empowerment. You're focusing on what's being done to you rather than what you can do for yourself. You're looking for someone or something outside of yourself to change so that you can feel better. The beautiful thing about recognizing this pattern is that recognition is the first step toward transformation. Once you can see how complaining keeps you stuck, you can begin to choose differently. You can start to catch yourself in the moment when you're about to launch into a familiar complaint and ask yourself, what would be more helpful right now? What would serve my growth and well-being? This shift from complaint consciousness to solution consciousness is one of the most powerful changes you can make in your life. Instead of focusing on what's wrong, you begin to focus on what's possible. Instead of rehearsing your problems, you start rehearsing your solutions. Instead of giving your power away to circumstances and other people, you reclaim it by taking responsibility for your own experience and your own response to whatever life brings. This doesn't mean pretending that challenges don't exist or that everything is perfect when it's not. It means approaching difficulties from a place of empowerment rather than victimization. It means asking yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I grow through this? What action can I take to improve this situation? These questions shift you out of victim energy and into creator energy, where real transformation becomes possible. When you break free from the complaint trap, you discover something wonderful. You have so much more energy available for creating the life you actually want. All the mental and emotional bandwidth that was going toward rehearsing problems becomes available for visioning solutions, taking positive action, and appreciating what's already working in your life. You become a magnet for positive experiences because you're putting positive energy into the world. There's incredible power in learning to hold your tongue when the impulse to complain arises. In those moments of restraint, you're not suppressing your feelings or pretending everything is fine. You're choosing to respond from your wisdom rather than react from your woundedness. You're creating space between stimulus and response, and in that space lies your freedom. This brings us to something truly beautiful, the discovery of your inner sanctuary. that place of quiet strength that exists within you regardless of what's happening around you. When you learn to find refuge in this internal space, rather than seeking validation and understanding from the external world, your entire relationship with life begins to shift. You stop being at the mercy of other people's moods, opinions, and reactions because you found an unshakable source of peace within yourself. This inner sanctuary isn't something you need to create. It already exists within you. It's the part of you that remains calm even when chaos surrounds you, the part that knows your worth even when others question it, the part that stays connected to love even when fear is loud. Learning to access this space regularly is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. When you operate from this centered place, silence becomes your ally rather than something to be feared. You no longer feel compelled to fill every pause in conversation with explanation or justification. You can sit comfortably with not having to defend every choice you make. You can allow others to have their opinions about your life without feeling responsible for changing their minds. This kind of peaceful restraint isn't passive, it's profoundly powerful. In this inner sanctuary, you discover that you don't need everyone to understand you in order to feel secure. You don't need everyone to agree with your choices in order to feel confident about them. You don't need constant external validation in order to know your own worth. This realization is incredibly liberating because it means your peace and self-worth are no longer dependent on factors outside your control. The energy you preserve through this practice of internal refuge is remarkable. When you're not constantly leaking life force through explanation and complaint, when you're not giving your power away through seeking approval, you have access to a reservoir of strength and clarity that might surprise you. This energy becomes available for creative pursuits, meaningful relationships, and positive action in the world. Your silence, when it comes from this centered place, speaks volumes. It communicates self-respect, inner confidence, and emotional maturity. People around you begin to sense that you're not someone who can be easily manipulated or drawn into drama. They start to treat you with more respect because you're treating yourself with more respect. Your peaceful presence becomes a gift to others, showing them what's possible when someone lives from their center rather than their wounds. This inner sanctuary also becomes a place where you can process your emotions privately before deciding how or whether to share them with others. Instead of immediately externalizing every feeling through explanation or complaint, you can take time to sit with your experience, understand what it's trying to teach you, and then choose how to respond from a place of wisdom rather than reactivity. Building a strong connection to this inner space takes practice, but it's some of the most worthwhile work you'll ever do. It's the foundation for everything else we're exploring together. The ability to own your power, to communicate from strength rather than desperation, and to move through life with grace even when things don't go according to plan. Learning to discern when to speak and when to remain silent is truly an art form, one that deepens with practice and self-awareness. This isn't about becoming someone who never expresses themselves or who avoids difficult conversations. It's about developing the wisdom to know when your words will serve the highest good and when silence will be more powerful. The key lies in understanding the difference between responding and reacting. When you react, you're being driven by emotion, often from old wounds or triggered patterns. Your words come from a place of defense, fear, or the need to prove something. When you respond, you're coming from a centered place where you've paused long enough to connect with your wisdom before speaking. Your words have intentionality behind them and are more likely to create connection rather than conflict. One of the most helpful practices you can develop is creating space between the impulse to speak and actually speaking. When you feel that familiar urge to explain yourself or voice a complaint, try taking 3 conscious breaths before saying anything. In those few moments, ask yourself, what am I hoping to accomplish with these words? Am I speaking from love or from fear? Will saying this move the situation forward or keep it stuck? Sometimes you'll discover that what you really need isn't to be understood by the other person, but to understand yourself better. The urge to explain might be showing you that you're not completely confident in your own choice and are seeking external validation to shore up your internal uncertainty. In these moments, the most powerful thing you can do is turn inward and strengthen your own conviction rather than trying to convince someone else. Other times, you might realize that your desire to complain is really a call for action. Instead of voicing your dissatisfaction for the 100th time, you might recognize that it's time to either take steps to change the situation or accept it fully and find peace with what is. Complaining keeps you stuck in the middle ground where you're neither changing nor accepting, and this middle ground is where suffering lives. There are certainly times when speaking up is the loving thing to do, when clear communication can prevent misunderstandings, when setting a boundary will protect your well-being, or when sharing your truth can deepen intimacy in a relationship. The difference is that when you speak from this centered place, your words carry a different quality. They're clean, direct, and free from the need to control the other person's response. When you do choose to communicate about something challenging, you can do so from a place of personal responsibility rather than blame. Instead of saying, "You make me feel," you might say, "I notice I feel when this happens." Instead of demanding that someone understand your perspective, you can simply share it and allow them to receive it however they're able. This approach maintains your dignity and power while still honoring your need for expression. The pause before speaking also gives you the opportunity to check in with your motivation. Are you about to speak because you genuinely believe it will be helpful? Or are you speaking from ego, from the need to be right, or from old patterns of seeking approval? There's no judgment here, just gentle awareness that helps you make more conscious choices. As you practice this discernment, you'll start to notice that many of the things you once felt compelled to explain simply don't need explanation. Your no can stand alone without a list of reasons. Your life choices can exist without justification to people who aren't living your life. Your emotions can be honored without needing to convince others that they're valid. This practice becomes especially powerful in relationships where old patterns of over-explanation have been established. When you begin responding differently, when you stop taking the bait to defend yourself, or when you choose not to engage in familiar complaint sessions, the dynamic begins to shift. Some people might initially resist this change because they're used to a different version of you, but those who truly care about your well-being will ultimately respect your growth. The art of knowing when to speak and when to stay silent also includes learning to trust your intuition about timing. Sometimes the right words at the wrong time fall on deaf ears, while the same words shared when someone is truly ready to hear them can be transformational. Developing sensitivity to these nuances is part of becoming a more conscious communicator. Remember, every time you choose conscious response over automatic reaction, you're rewiring your nervous system. You're teaching your body that you can be safe without constantly defending yourself, that you can be loved without explaining every aspect of who you are, and that you can navigate relationships from a place of strength rather than desperation. This is profound healing work that ripples out into every area of your life. When you begin to embody this new way of being, when you stop over-explaining and complaining and start operating from your inner sanctuary, something magical happens in your relationships. The people in your life begin to respond to you differently, not because you're trying to control their behavior, but because you're emanating a different energy. You're no longer coming from a place of neediness or desperation for understanding. Instead, you're radiating self-respect, inner confidence, and peaceful strength. This shift can be surprising at first, both for you and for those around you. People who are used to hearing your explanations and complaints might initially wonder what's changed. Some might even try to pull you back into old patterns by asking more questions, pressing for justifications, or trying to engage you in familiar complaint sessions. This is a natural response. When one person in a relationship system changes, it creates ripples that affect everyone involved. The beautiful thing is that you don't need to announce your transformation or explain what you're doing differently. Your energy speaks for itself. When you stop being reactive and defensive, when you respond from centeredness rather than woundedness, people begin to treat you with more respect. They start to sense that you're not someone who can be easily manipulated or drawn into drama. Your peaceful presence becomes a stabilizing force in your relationships. Some relationships might go through a period of adjustment as these new dynamics establish themselves. People who were comfortable with the old version of you, the one who always explained and sometimes complained, might need time to get used to this more empowered version. This is perfectly natural and nothing to be concerned about. Healthy relationships will adapt and often become even stronger as you model what it looks like to own your power with grace. You might discover that certain relationships were built on unhealthy dynamics. Perhaps someone in your life was used to having power over you through making you feel like you constantly needed to justify yourself. As you stop participating in these dynamics, these relationships will either transform into something healthier or naturally fade away. This can feel challenging at first, but it's actually a sign that your healing is working. The relationships that truly serve your highest good will flourish as you step into this new way of being. People who genuinely care about you will appreciate the peace and stability you bring. They'll enjoy being around someone who isn't constantly seeking validation or venting about the same problems over and over. Your transformation gives others permission to explore their own relationship with explanation and complaint, creating opportunities for mutual growth. When you set boundaries without lengthy explanations, you're teaching others how to treat you while also showing them what healthy boundary setting looks like. When you choose not to engage in complaint sessions, you're creating space for more positive, solution-focused conversations. Your new energy becomes a gift to your relationships because it elevates the quality of interaction everyone can experience. This doesn't mean you become cold or disconnected. If anything, you become more authentically present because you're not wasting energy on defensive behaviors. You can listen more deeply because you're not constantly preparing your next explanation. You can love more freely because you're not seeking approval in return. Your relationships become more genuine because you're showing up as your true self rather than as someone who needs to be understood or validated. The ripple effect of your transformation extends beyond your immediate relationships into every interaction you have. Coworkers begin to respect your time and decisions more readily. Family members stop trying to manage your choices. Friends appreciate your peaceful presence during their own challenges. You become someone others can count on for stability and wisdom, rather than someone who adds to the chaos through constant explanation and complaint. Living your power on a daily basis requires developing practical routines and habits that support your new way of being. This isn't about perfection. It's about creating a foundation of practices that help you stay connected to your inner sanctuary and make conscious choices throughout your day. These practices become anchors that keep you centered even when life gets challenging. Starting your day with intention is one of the most powerful gifts you can give yourself. Before you check your phone or engage with the demands of the day, take a few moments to connect with your inner wisdom. You might place your hand on your heart and silently remind yourself, "Today, I choose to respond rather than react. Today, I trust my inner knowing. Today, I honor my worth without needing others to confirm it." These few moments of conscious intention set the tone for everything that follows. Throughout your day, practice the pause. When you feel the familiar urge to explain yourself or voice a complaint, take 3 conscious breaths before speaking. Use this pause to ask yourself what would serve the highest good in this moment. Sometimes you'll choose to speak, and sometimes you'll choose silence, but either choice will come from wisdom rather than automatic reaction. Develop a practice of checking in with your body regularly. Your physical sensations are valuable messengers that can help you recognize when you're starting to slip into old patterns. When you notice tension in your shoulders, tightness in your chest, or a racing heart, these might be signals that you're moving into explanation or complaint mode. Your body's wisdom can help you course correct before you lose your center. Create moments throughout your day to return to your inner sanctuary. This might be as simple as taking a mindful walk, spending a few minutes in quiet reflection, or placing your hands on your heart and breathing deeply. These small practices help you maintain your connection to your peaceful center even when external circumstances are demanding your attention. Evening reflection can be particularly powerful for reinforcing your new patterns. Before sleep, you might gently review your day and acknowledge the moments when you chose conscious response over automatic reaction. Celebrate the times you stayed centered when you might have previously become defensive. Notice the instances when you chose not to complain and instead looked for solutions or acceptance. This positive reinforcement helps your nervous system recognize and strengthen these new neural pathways. Keep a simple journal where you can privately process emotions and experiences before deciding whether to share them with others. This practice helps you distinguish between feelings that need external expression and those that simply need internal acknowledgement. Writing can be a powerful way to release emotional energy without needing to explain yourself to anyone else. Develop mantras or gentle reminders that you can use when you feel triggered. These might be phrases like, "I trust my inner knowing," "My worth is not dependent on others' understanding," or "I choose peace over the need to be right." Having these ready helps you shift your energy quickly when old patterns try to resurface. Remember that this is a practice, not a performance. There will be days when you slip back into old habits of over-explaining or complaining, and that's perfectly human. The goal isn't to never make mistakes, but to catch yourself more quickly and return to your center with compassion rather than self-judgment. Each time you make this return to consciousness, you're strengthening your capacity to live from your power. At the heart of the need to constantly explain and complain lies a wound that many of us carry: the belief that our worth is conditional on other people's approval and understanding. This wound often forms early in life when our authentic selves weren't fully welcomed or when love felt contingent on being a certain way. Healing this core wound is essential for lasting transformation because without addressing the root, we tend to manage symptoms rather than create real change. The truth is, you are worthy of love and respect simply because you exist. Your worth isn't something you need to earn through perfect behavior, compelling explanations, or winning others over to your point of view. It's an inherent quality of your being that can't be diminished by someone else's inability to understand or appreciate you. This might be difficult to accept if you've spent years believing otherwise, but it's the foundation upon which all healthy relationships with yourself and others must be built. Healing the approval wound requires developing an unshakable relationship with yourself, one where you become your own source of validation, understanding, and acceptance. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or dismissive of others' perspectives. It means developing such a strong connection to your own inner wisdom that others' opinions, while perhaps interesting or useful, are no longer necessary for your sense of security and worth. Start by noticing the internal dialogue that drives your need for external approval. When you feel compelled to explain yourself, what are you telling yourself about what will happen if others don't understand? When you find yourself seeking validation, what fear is underneath that seeking? Often we're operating from childhood beliefs like, if people don't approve of me, I'm not safe, or if I can't make them understand, I must be wrong. Practice speaking to yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a beloved friend. When you make a choice that others question, remind yourself that you're the expert on your own life. When you feel something that others don't validate, remind yourself that your emotional experience is valid simply because it's yours. When you set a boundary that others don't like, remind yourself that protecting your well-being is not only acceptable but necessary. Develop daily practices that fill your own approval cup. This might mean acknowledging your efforts each day, celebrating small victories, or simply placing your hand on your heart and offering yourself words of encouragement. When your internal approval tank is full, you're less likely to seek filling it from external sources. Notice how different it feels in your body when you're seeking approval versus when you're resting in self-acceptance. Approval seeking often creates tension, anxiety, and a sense of reaching outside yourself for something. Self-acceptance feels peaceful, grounded, and complete. Your body can become a reliable guide for recognizing when you're operating from neediness versus wholeness. Learn to trust your own experience even when it differs from others' perspectives. You are the only person who lives inside your skin, who knows the full context of your life, who understands your unique circumstances and needs. Others can offer valuable input and perspective, but they can never know better than you what's right for your life. Trusting yourself doesn't mean being closed to input. It means being open to information while maintaining sovereignty over your own choices. As you heal this core wound, you'll find that your relationships become more authentic and satisfying. When you're not desperately seeking approval, you can engage with others from a place of genuine interest rather than neediness. When you're not trying to control their opinions of you, you can actually hear what they're saying and respond thoughtfully. Paradoxically, when you stop needing everyone to approve of you, you often find that more people genuinely appreciate and respect you. As we come to the close of our time together, I want you to take a moment to honor yourself for being here, for being open to growth, for having the courage to examine patterns that might not be serving you anymore. Change isn't always easy, but you've already taken the most important step by becoming aware of how you want to live differently. The journey from constantly explaining and complaining to owning your power in silence isn't something that happens overnight. It's a gentle unfolding, a gradual rewiring of old patterns, a compassionate return to your own center again and again. There will be moments when you slip back into familiar habits, and when this happens, please be gentle with yourself. Every master was once a beginner, and every expert was once a novice who chose to keep practicing despite imperfection. What you're learning to do is nothing less than revolutionary in a world that often rewards those who speak the loudest, defend the most vigorously, and seek validation the most desperately. You're choosing a different path, one of quiet strength, inner knowing, and peaceful restraint. This path might not always be understood by others, but it will transform your life in ways that will continually amaze you. Remember that your silence, when it comes from a place of inner fullness rather than fear, is not empty space. It's pregnant with possibility. Your refusal to explain every choice isn't stubbornness, it's self-respect. Your decision to break free from chronic complaining isn't denial, it's empowerment. You're not becoming someone who doesn't care. You're becoming someone who cares so deeply about your own well-being and growth that you're willing to change patterns that no longer serve you. The power you're claiming was never really lost. It was just covered over by learned behaviors and old wounds. As you peel away these layers and return to your authentic self, you'll discover reserves of strength, peace, and wisdom that have been waiting patiently for your return. This power doesn't need to announce itself or defend itself. It simply is, and it radiates naturally from someone who knows their worth. Trust the process, trust yourself, and trust that every small step you take toward living from your center rather than your wounds is creating ripples of healing that extend far beyond what you can see. You are not just changing your own life. You're modeling for others what it looks like to live with dignity, grace, and authentic power. Your life is a precious gift, and you have every right to live it on your own terms. You don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace over chaos, wisdom over reactivity, or self-love over the exhausting pursuit of external validation. Own your power, beautiful soul. The world needs what you have to offer when you're operating from your truest, most centered self. And remember, you are deeply loved, exactly as you are, right here, right now.